Hi, in this lecture, I'm going to talk to you about introduction to options. So, first, what is an option contract? Now, an option contract is a contract that gives the owner or the option buyer a right but not the obligation to either buy or sell an asset, which is an underlying at a given price. So, let's break this down. We speak of the option buyer as the owner of the contract, and he is a person who has a right but not the obligation. So what's the difference? A right means you may or may not do a particular thing, whereas an obligation is you just have to. So the difference that we've seen in all the derivative contracts before this are that all these contracts except for options give the buyer the right and the obligation. So it's not that whether you wish to do it or not. That's why this is called an option, because you can or you may not. Next, the option seller, however, has no right, instead has an obligation to sell or buy the asset dependent upon the nature of the option contract. So the nature of the option contract will determine whether the seller or the person who writes the option is also known as the option buyer, option writer. I'm sorry, and this person will only have an obligation to either sell or buy the asset. Now, the owner of a call option has the right to purchase an underlying at a specific price for a specified time period. So now we know that you can either buy or sell, but when you have the right to buy and you have bought that right to buy, you are the owner of an option which is known as a call option. All right. So next, the owner of a put option has the right to sell an underlying at a specific price for a specified time period. Now, a simple way to remember which option type pertains to buying an asset or selling an asset, think of it this way. If you think of the word call, you might associate that with asking something to come to you. So you can think of calling the underlying or buying the underlying. And the second option is the put option, where you have to put something away. So putting an asset or putting it away or selling an underlying. So that's one way you can understand which asset, which option is to buy and which option is to sell for the option buyer. So now let's look at the four possible option positions. So options may be similar to futures in some aspects, but though like I spoke of, the difference majorly lies between breaking the rights and the obligations. If you're a buyer of a future, you have to buy it no matter what in the future. But in the option case, if you have a call option, you may or may not buy, dependent upon whether you are satisfied with the gain that you're going to get when the price of the underlying fluctuates. Okay, so as a result, there are four possible option types. The first four possible option positions. The first is the long call. Now, the buyer of the call, it has a right to buy an underlying asset. Next is the short call. So this is the other side or the other wing of the transaction, where the writer or the seller has the obligation to sell the underlying in the case of a call option. So he is known as going short on the call, whereas the buyer is known as going long on the call. Next, we have a long put, where the buyer of the put has a right to sell an underlying asset, and a short put, where the writer or the seller of the put, there's a small typo there, has an obligation to buy the underlying asset. That should have been put. It's not writer or seller of the call. That should have been writer or seller of the put. Now, finally, the timing to exercise options. Again, over here, there are two kinds of options. The first is an American option, and the second is a European option. So let's look at the American option first. It's an option that at any point of time up to the settlement date, this option can be exercised. What does that mean? That means prior to the settlement date, which is as per the contract, an option can be net settled. Next is European option. At the time of the settlement of the contract, that is at the expiration date of the contract, it's only then that a European option can be settled. It cannot be settled prior to the settlement date. Now, at the time of expiration, an American and the European option will have the same value, whereas at any given time prior to the expiry, the values of the American and European options are non identical. Now, there are a lot of questions that may be popping up in your mind in terms of how do you substantiate this theory that of the value being different, and can we see examples of American and European option? Well, the question to the former part with regard to valuation of options is something which is going to be dealt extensively in level 2, so you don't really need to worry about option valuation as such much during level 1. In terms of American and European options, yes, we will be covering to some extent in future sections. Alright, so that's it for this lecture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Until then, bye. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to click subscribe for more videos such as this one. Until then, bye for now.